That girl didn't lose anything. She only lost 7 years paying off debt for my family so that today we could cross her name off a $1.2 million house. My mother said that in front of the lawyer, the bank representative, and my younger brother, the one who had just received the brand new set of keys, cold metal resting neatly in his palm. The small conference room in Newark went completely silent. I was standing right there, less than 2 meters away from them. But in that moment, I was no longer anyone's daughter. I was like a document that had already been signed, folded up, and set aside. There's something strange in many families. The person who carries the debt the longest is often the first one removed when the asset reaches its peak. Before I continue, I want to ask you one honest question. Where are you listening to this story right now? In the kitchen, in the car, or alone after a long day? If you've ever been the one standing behind, paying the bills, staying silent, only to be pushed aside once everything was secure, comment "been there," press like, and stay until the end of this video. The signing happened faster than I expected. There were no flowers, no handshakes, just a long dark wood table, a few leather chairs, and a thick stack of files placed neatly in the center. My mother sat upright, fingers interlaced, her voice steady and practiced, the same tone she'd used with the bank for years. My stepfather leaned back in his chair, eyes drifting over his phone screen. My younger brother didn't bother hiding his smile. He turned the keyring over and over in his hand, the soft clinking sound already sounding like a new habit. No one looked at me when the lawyer began explaining the terms. I heard the house's name read aloud, heard the market value, heard the familiar phrases about transfer liability, legal effect. Everything washed over me like an ad I'd heard too many times. I stood there, arms hanging loose, feeling like I was watching a scene that had been rehearsed in advance, except I was the only one who hadn't been given the script. When the lawyer stopped and looked up, he turned toward me. "Do you need to sign anything else?" The question was polite, procedural. My mother didn't wait for me to speak. "No," she said immediately, short and firm. "She's done." The lawyer nodded and flipped to another page. My brother let out a small laugh, as if he'd just been relieved of a minor inconvenience. I lowered my eyes to the documents in front of me. Dense text, familiar numbers. And near the bottom of the page, tucked into what looked like an ordinary clause, I saw my name. Not in the witness section, not in the part that ended responsibility, but on a different line, thin and quiet, as if it had never been meant to be mentioned. I didn't say anything. I just stared at it for a beat longer than necessary. There was my signature, never canceled. I left the conference room a few minutes before they did. The hallway was long, fluorescent lights reflecting off white tile, cold and even. In the elevator, I leaned against the metal wall and opened my phone out of habit. A habit built over 7 years. The banking app loaded instantly. The screen lit up with a payment schedule stretching on like a strip with no end. I scrolled. Month after month, year after year, the same numbers repeating, emotionless. I'd looked at them every morning, before I even brushed my teeth. 7 years earlier, that house had been nothing more than a thick file on the kitchen table. My mother spoke lightly, like she was asking me to hold a bag for her. "You have good credit. Just sign for the family for a while." My stepfather sat across from me, nodding. My brother was still in college, eyes glued to his laptop. No one talked about risk. No one talked about a backup plan. There was only one sentence, repeated calmly, "Just hang on a little longer." I signed one signature, then a few more. My life started shrinking from that point on. During the day, I worked full-time at a logistics company near Newark Airport. At night, I took on extra data entry shifts for a private clinic in Jersey City. Some nights, I typed until 2 a.m., then fell asleep on the sofa with my jacket still on. The next morning, I transferred the money. On time. Not a single day late. I didn't tell anyone I canceled my first post-college trip. I didn't mention postponing my wedding indefinitely. I just kept doing the same thing over and over. Open the app, transfer money, save the confirmation. Every time I asked about progress, my mother answered in the same familiar tone. Almost done. The house is about to go up in value. Just a little more. Once she even laughed and said I was lucky to be single with no obligations. I nodded. My brother changed cars. My stepfather renovated the kitchen. The house grew brighter, newer, and I grew used to calculating every small expense. In the elevator, I stopped scrolling. A summary line appeared at the bottom of the transaction history. I stared at that number longer than usual. $386,000. Interest. Just interest. Not including principal. I turned off the screen. The elevator doors opened. Outside, the parking lot was flooded with afternoon sun. Everything looked painfully normal. Nothing about those 7 years resembled a heroic sacrifice, just days worn down slowly by on-time transfers. I used to believe that was family, and that when everything was stable, I'd have a place too. But when the keys were handed over, no one said my name. That night, I didn't drive straight back to my apartment. I looped through an old street where a late-night cafe still glowed, yellow light spilling onto the sidewalk like an unchanged habit. I sat in the car a few extra minutes, then opened the glove compartment. A thin notebook lay there, worn cover, corners bent from being shoved into my bag in a hurry. That notebook had been with me since I was 22. The first page still held pencil marks. Date, amount. A short note. First month. I remembered that day clearly. My mother sat across from me at the kitchen table, her tea already cold. She didn't say much. She just placed her hand over mine and squeezed lightly. "You're the only one I trust," she said. Her voice was quiet, no begging, no pressure. I nodded out of reflex. I thought, it's just a signature. How big could it be? I signed the first time on a rainy afternoon. Outside the notary's office, the parking lot was speckled with water. I had just received an email about a job opportunity in Pennsylvania. Higher pay. I could move within 2 months. I didn't reply to that email. I closed the laptop. I stayed. The pages that followed grew thicker. Each line was an expense. Every month had a small arrow pointing to the next. There was no line marked completed, no word saying end, just continuation. I flipped to the middle of the notebook. My handwriting changed there, faster, tighter. Some pages listed only numbers, no notes. I remembered sitting on the living room floor, lights off, the glow of the laptop screen, entering data while checking my account. Outside the window, traffic thinned. I thought, after this stretch, things will be okay. There was something odd. Throughout those years, no one ever gave me a written promise. No email, no text. Not a single confirmation that once things were settled, I'd have a place. Everything was said out loud, in soft phrases. "We're family. I owe you. We'll figure it out later." I stopped on a page stained faintly with coffee. That day, I'd written a tiny note in the margin. Ask again? But I didn't ask. I closed the notebook, put it away, and kept transferring money. Sitting in the car, I rested the notebook on my lap. Outside, an elderly couple walked past, hand in hand, moving slowly. I watched them for a moment. A thought flickered, quick, breathless. What if I'd said no back then? The thought didn't linger. I started the car. The dashboard lights came on. I drove off carrying the old notebook and the question I deliberately avoided for 7 years. The next morning, I called the bank. Not from home, but from the parking lot of a nearby supermarket. I sat in the car, windows up, radio off. I reread the account number 3 times before dialing, as if one wrong digit could make everything collapse. The woman on the other end spoke clearly, calmly. She asked to verify my identity, then told me to hold. I looked out at the line of shopping carts pushed together. An older man slowly guided one back, careful as if he didn't want to knock anything over. She came back on the line, her tone unchanged. According to our records, you are the primary guarantor. I stayed silent. She continued as if reading from a screen. Not a helper, not a cosigner, the primary guarantor. If there were any issues with the transfer, if the loan restructuring didn't meet the terms, the financial obligation would return to me. All of it. I asked one question. Even if my name is no longer on the deed? She paused briefly. Yes, unless the responsibility is legally terminated. Standing alone in the parking lot, I realized I was still the main bearer of the debt while they were preparing to celebrate in that $1 million house. People say family shouldn't keep score, but if family treats you like a tool for profit, would you choose to look the other way out of duty? Or stand up and demand fairness like I did? Let me know your choice in the comments. The call ended. I stayed still for a few minutes, hands on the steering wheel. In my mind, the pieces began shifting, slowly, clearly. The cold conference room. The words, "she's done." The small print at the end of the contract, no one looking at me. There are moments when the story seems to step away from you, just far enough to see it clearly. Some people aren't afraid of you leaving. They're afraid of you realizing where you stand. My phone buzzed as I opened the car door. A text from my mother. Come by the house this afternoon. There are a few papers you need to sign to wrap things up. Before I could reply, another message followed. Just procedural, to keep everything clean. That afternoon, I went. The house looked different. Fresh paint, the smell of new wood. My brother was assembling a bookshelf in the living room, one earbud dangling. My mother placed a thin stack of papers on the table, neatly clipped. Termination of responsibility, she said lightly, as if handing me a menu. Once you sign, you're no longer involved. I flipped to the first page. Familiar language, but some sections were printed smaller, squeezed near the margins. I read slowly. My hand stopped at the signature line. My mother stood right beside me. She placed the pen in my hand and pressed lightly. Sign. Let's finish this. I looked up. My brother glanced over, then went back to the shelf. My stepfather leaned in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. No one said anything else. No one asked if I was tired. No one mentioned 7 years. My heart beat faster. I knew that if I signed, silence would return. I also knew that if I signed wrong, that debt would find me in the dark, when no one else was there to share responsibility. I set the pen down. I didn't sign. Not yet. At least not right then. In that moment, one nod would have made me the good daughter, again in their eyes. But my soul would have gone numb forever. What do you think someone who endured 7 years like I did would do next? Confront them head on or quietly withdraw? Leave an emoji showing your guess before you hear what really happened. I picked up the pen. My mother exhaled softly, as if she'd been waiting for that exact moment. She pulled her chair closer and straightened the papers in front of me. My brother looked up briefly, then back down. My stepfather stepped away from the kitchen doorway and stood behind my mother, one hand on the back of her chair. I signed. My handwriting was steady. I signed everywhere they indicated. When I finished, I slid the papers back to my mother. She smiled, the familiar smile from times when things were done. See, she said, that's all it takes. I stood up and took my bag. No one stopped me. I drove away right after, without looking back at the newly painted house. That night, I opened my laptop, not at the dining table, but on the living room floor, my back against the sofa. I laid 2 sets of papers side by side. One I had signed at my mother's house. The other I'd prepared in advance, printed and neatly folded. The content was identical line by line, except for an attachment at the end. That attachment requested the bank to review the full transaction history and reconfirm guarantor responsibility before any termination could take effect. I emailed the bank, attached the document. The subject line was short, emotionless. I hit send, then shut the laptop. The next morning, while I was at work, My phone buzzed. Not my mother's number. An unfamiliar one. I let it ring for a beat, then answered. The voice on the other end was more serious than before. They informed me that the account tied to the loan had been temporarily frozen for a review. No transactions, no transfers, no changes to legal status until completion. I said thank you. The call ended. Less than 10 minutes later, my mother called. I watched her name light up on the screen. I didn't answer. A text followed immediately. What did you do? Then another. The bank just called. Why is there a review? I placed the phone face down on my desk. At lunch, I went out for coffee. When I returned, there were 6 missed calls from my mother, from my stepfather, another unfamiliar number, probably the lawyer. I didn't respond. I drank my coffee, the familiar bitterness, no sugar. That afternoon, during a meeting, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a short text. You need to explain this. I looked at the words for a few seconds, then locked the screen. I had signed, exactly as they wanted. But some signatures aren't meant to end things. Some signatures are meant to force everything to stop, to shine light straight onto what's been hidden for 7 years. That evening, I went home earlier than usual. I cooked, washed dishes. Everything felt strangely normal. My phone kept buzzing in the living room. I left it there. For the first time in a long while, I didn't explain. The next morning, I woke up to 12 missed calls, all from the same number. I let the phone ring a little longer before picking it up. As soon as I touched the screen, it lit up again. I answered. My mother's voice broke from the first sentence. She spoke fast, mixed with crying. The bank kept calling. The lawyer wouldn't give straight answers. Everything was stuck halfway. What are you trying to do? She asked, as if I'd dropped a dish, not frozen an entire house. Before I could respond, my stepfather took the phone. His voice was sharp, barely containing anger. He called me selfish, said I was making a big deal out of nothing, said I was tearing the family apart because I didn't know when to let go. What do you think you're playing at? He demanded. Do you know the consequences? The third call came from my younger brother. His voice was lower, but not softer. He said I was embarrassing him, said the neighbors were asking questions, said his friends saw the bank messages and didn't understand what was happening. You always have to make everything complicated, he said. This house was almost done. Around noon, the lawyer called. This time I answered. His voice didn't dance around it. He said the review process had started. Some documents in the past hadn't been prepared in the proper order. Some guarantor terms had never actually been released. He paused for a beat, then said one sentence very slowly, very clearly. Without her, this house isn't legal. I stood by my office window and looked down at the parking lot below. Cars came and went steadily. Life out there kept moving at its own pace. That afternoon, my mother called again. This time she didn't cry right away. Her voice was small, nothing like her usual tone. She brought up the years when I still lived at home. Brought up the dinners I used to come home late to. Brought up how I'd always been the reasonable one. You don't have to do this, she said. Everything has a way to be talked about. I looked at the calendar on my computer screen. A normal workday. Nothing looked like a battle, but everything felt tight as a pulled string. That night, my stepfather texted. Not long, just a few lines. He said if this didn't stop, he'd find another way. He said I was putting myself in trouble. The message ended with a period. No goodbye. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my brother's number. I didn't pick up. A text came right after. Please say something. Mom is panicking. I sat down on the sofa, my back against the cushion. In the quiet apartment, the air conditioner hummed evenly. I set my phone on the table, the screen lighting up and going dark over and over. For the first time, they weren't telling me I was done. In those scattered messages, I saw something very clearly. They were starting to beg. The meeting happened on a drizzly afternoon. I chose a small conference room at a law office near downtown Newark. A long wooden table, 4 chairs, a pitcher of water in the middle. I arrived 10 minutes early, sat up straight, set my purse under the chair. My lawyer came in after, nodded, opened the file, didn't say much. My mother arrived with my stepfather and my brother. They walked in like they were used to rooms like this. My mother sat across from me, gripping her bag tightly. My stepfather pulled out a chair and sat down, his eyes flicking quickly around the room. My brother picked a seat at the edge of the table, leaning back, trying to look calm. My lawyer spoke first. His voice was steady, each sentence dropping cleanly. He talked about the current legal status, about the ongoing review, about the consequences if everything stayed frozen. My mother listened, lips pressed tight. My stepfather crossed his arms, tried to cut in a few times, but got stopped by a very slight raised hand. I opened my bag and pulled out a stack of papers. Bank statements. I placed them on the table and lined them up neatly. The first page was a summary sheet. I slid it toward them. The number sat in the middle of the page, bold, $386,000. 7 years of interest, no underlining, no extra explanation needed. $386,000. That's the blood and sweat of 7 years of my youth poured into that house without even one decent thank you. Is anyone listening to this story who's also been the one in the background, quietly paying, staying silent so the family could stay warm, only to be shoved aside when everything was finally secure? If you've ever tasted that used up and tossed away feeling, press like so we know we're not alone. My brother looked down, then snapped his head up. That's not our fault, he said. You volunteered. I didn't look at him. I looked at my mother. I'm not asking for the house, I said, my voice normal, not rising even a notch. I'm not asking for the keys. I'm not asking to be on the deed. My mother let out a breath, like she'd just been released. But I wasn't done. I'm asking for the right to choose, I said. I'm asking to decide my life from now on. My stepfather gave a short laugh. You talk like we locked you up. My lawyer leaned forward. The issue isn't locking her up, he said. The issue is binding, and this binding ends only when my client agrees. The air in the room shifted fast. My mother reached her hand toward me, stopping halfway. Honey, she said, her voice different now. Families don't need to go this far. I looked at that hand. For 7 years, I'd been used to stepping forward any time the family needed someone to stand up. This time I didn't. I don't want to be your family anymore, I said. The words landed softly, but the room went dead silent. No one reacted right away. My brother opened his mouth, then closed it again. My stepfather sat up straighter, like he was about to argue, but couldn't find the first line. I kept going, not fast, not slow. I'll sign the termination when everything is properly released. Not before that. Not with promises, not with tears. My lawyer nodded and closed the file. The meeting ended without a single handshake. When I stood up, my mother said my name once. I stopped and turned. She looked at me for a long time. I walked out of the conference room into the bright white hallway ahead. Behind me, no one was saying I was done anymore. After that meeting, everything slowed down. Not because anyone wanted to calm down, but because there was no other choice. The bank kept reviewing. The lawyer sent regular emails, each one only a few lines, dry and precise. I read them, confirmed, then forwarded them. No extra notes. Some people said I could go further. I could sue. I could demand damages for the opportunities I'd lost. The lawyer said that too, bluntly. I listened. I didn't nod, and I didn't shake my head. I let that suggestion sit on the table. I made one request: repay exactly what I had paid. No more, no apology attached, no emotional deal attached. The amount was listed clearly, matched against the bank statements, month by month, payment by payment. No arguing, no negotiating. The waiting days passed in a strange silence. I went to work, came home, cooked like usual. I answered work emails, attended meetings, wrote down small tasks. My life didn't explode like revenge. It returned to the steady rhythm that had been interrupted for 7 years. One evening, my mother called. I saw her name. This time I answered. Her voice was low, no longer shaking like before. "Are you really doing this?" she asked. No accusation, no blame, just a bare question. I looked out the window. Across the street, a family was clearing a dinner table on their porch, warm light covering small, quiet movements. I answered, my voice normal. "I'm just doing what's right." She went quiet. I could hear her breathing, slow and heavy. She didn't say anything else. The call ended without a single promise made. For a very brief moment, I thought about what I hadn't chosen. I thought about the times I could have just nodded and let it pass like before. I thought about the price of fake peace, but the feeling moved through quickly. It wasn't strong enough to pull me back. When the bank sent the final confirmation, the email had only one subject line: settlement approved. I opened the attachment. The number was there. Exactly what I'd requested. Not a dollar more, not a dollar less. I forwarded that email to my lawyer, then saved it in a new folder. The folder name was short. That night, I cleaned my apartment, not to forget, but to make space. I threw out old papers that didn't matter anymore, kept only what I needed. The old expense notebook went into a drawer, no longer living in my bag. I didn't win by taking the house. I stopped at enough. And for the first time, that point was chosen by me. After everything closed on paper, my world shrank fast. No more calls, no texts, no casual evening questions. My family disappeared from my daily life like they'd never been there. I heard it from mutual acquaintances, from scattered bits of news. They said I chose my own path. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I moved on a misty morning. No announcement, no housewarming. I rented a smaller apartment, farther from downtown, far enough that streetlights didn't shine straight into my window every night. I changed my phone numbers, kept only a few work contacts and 2 close friends. The other names were deleted cleanly, the way you clear out an overcrowded drawer. One afternoon, while unpacking the last box, I found an old cardboard box. Inside were things I'd carried for years. A few faded family photos, a bracelet my mother gave me in college, a few rushed birthday notes. I sat on the floor, opened each item, placed it back in the box. I didn't cry. I just felt empty. There are moments when a story seems to pause just to breathe. No one stands on a stage accepting an award. No applause. Some victories don't come with applause. In the days that followed, I was tired in a different way. Not tired from working 2 jobs, not tired from explaining, tired from the long silence. I came home, made a simple meal, ate alone. I turned off the lights early. In the dark, the new room had different noises, more unfamiliar. I lay there and let my body get used to it. Only once my brother texted, just one line: "Mom wants to know if you're okay." I stared at it for a long time. I didn't reply. I locked the screen. Some doors don't need to be slammed, just not reopened. That weekend, I went through the old box again. I kept a few things and threw the rest away, not out of hatred, but because there was no space left to carry it. I taped the box shut, wrote one small word on the outside, and pushed it into the back corner of the closet. I don't regret it. That much was clear. But some mornings I woke up with a heavy feeling in my chest, like I'd run a long distance with no finish line to stop at. I brewed coffee, watched the steam rise, and waited for the feeling to fade, slowly but surely. And I kept living inside that emptiness day by day, quietly, without turning back. 3 months later, the last debt was paid off. No one was beside me then. No congratulations, no texts. I just watched the confirmation line appear on the screen and closed the laptop. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking. I stood up, poured myself a glass of water, and drank slowly. The feeling wasn't relief, it was emptiness. A very real emptiness. I rebuilt my life from things so small I'd never noticed them before. I slept enough. I went to work without calculating what day I had to transfer money. I bought groceries without standing at checkout weighing every item. I no longer had the title of the child who carries everything, but I also no longer had that invisible fear that if I stopped, everything would collapse. Some nights, I sat alone thinking about the word justice. I used to think justice would feel like winning, or at least satisfaction, but it didn't. Justice arrived quietly. It didn't clap for you, it just gave you back the right to stand upright and took away the things that kept you staying even when you'd been hurting for a long time. I lost my family in the most familiar sense of the word. In return, I kept myself. And for the first time, I understood that some choices don't make you happy right away, but they stop you from betraying yourself. I'm not angry anymore, and I don't forgive the way people usually mean it. I just stopped hoping they would become different people. When that hope disappeared, the exhaustion started to fade too. I learned that love doesn't mean carrying an endless weight for someone else, and staying silent too long isn't sacrifice. Sometimes it's just erasing yourself from your own life. The story you just heard is fictional, inspired by very real lives. It isn't meant to encourage you to make any specific decision from it. Everyone has different circumstances, boundaries, and limits. But if there's one thing I hope you carry with you after this story ends, it's this question. In your life, what are you carrying for someone else that no one ever asked if you were willing to carry? Sometimes the biggest gift you can give yourself isn't another sacrifice, it's honesty. Honest about what you can do, honest about your limits, and brave enough to say enough before you run dry. Before you leave, I want to ask you, where are you listening to this story? In the car, in the kitchen, or in a very private moment you rarely allow yourself to slow down? If you've ever felt taken for granted, share one line in the comments. Someone might read it and realize they're not alone. If this story gave you a little reflection, a little empathy, or simply made you pause and breathe a little deeper, I'd be grateful if you leave a like. And if you want to keep listening to other stories about boundaries, choices, and ordinary people learning to hold on to themselves, subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for staying until the end. Your time is valuable. The fact that you used it to listen can be a kindness all by itself.